Lift your hearts up to the Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Spread the news that He is joy.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing hallelujah, God is joy. Lift your hearts up to the Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Spread the news that He is true.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing hallelujah, God is true. Lift your hearts up to the Lord. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Spread the news that He is love. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing hallelujah, God is love. Sing to the mountains, sing to the meadows, sing hallelujah, God is love.
This reading is from the Bhagavad Gita. To the knower of Brahman, the Supreme Spirit, the Vedas are of no more use than a well when the land all around is in flood. There is a story from the life of St. Francis of Assisi in Italy. An old, nearly blind beggar woman asked him for alms. She couldn't see that he was dressed as poorly as herself, and unlikely to have anything to share with her. It distressed him, however, that he had nothing to give her. And then he realized that he still had one thing in his possession, his well-thumbed copy of the Holy Bible. This he gave her, in the hope that she might be able to sell it for a few coins. He then prayed almost apologetically, "Lord, to help this poor woman, I have even given away your word." A voice within him replied, "Francis, I have planted my word in your heart. You have no need for that merely printed copy of it." Whether it be the Vedas, the Gita, the Bible, or any other great scripture, the important thing is that God's truth be written on the pages of one's own heart. For of course Krishna is speaking here not only of the Vedas, but of true scripture generally. His reference to the Vedas, however, provides an opportunity for writing about them specifically without breaking the flow in the commentary by including the thoughts Yogananda expressed about them. The Vedas are unique among the world's scriptures in that they were composed in a high age when there was not the division that exists today. Between religion and daily existence. The people then had no need for separate places or times of worship. All life to them was, in a sense, worship, and every act an offering to God. As people's understanding declined in a descending age, it became necessary to write down in words the truths people had been able to memorize effortlessly. At that time, an explanation for the gunas, for the duality inherent in all things, and for how everything came into existence became necessary. In the descending age, it was seen to be necessary also to offer people religious practices that would help them satisfy their increasingly worldly and ego-affirming needs, rituals that would enable them to gain what they wanted in terms of power, mates, children, and success. Although people's consciousness was diminishing in clarity, there was still a spiritual bias in everything they did. Rituals were therefore created that would enable human beings to work in cooperation with the devas, or astral beings, of higher angelic nature, as well as with lower sorts, to accomplish their ends. Today, mankind has all but forgotten those higher, or at any rate subtler entities, which otherwise would help man in the production of food, of good weather, of energies for success, and of countless benefits from which most aware people, living in tune with nature, seek help as a matter of course. People scoff at nature spirits such as fairies, but as Swami Sri Yukteswar is quoted in Autobiography of a Yogi as saying, they actually exist. Man's indifference to them has been causing those energies gradually to withdraw from our planet. There is a natural consequence of the fact of those beings finding themselves ignored. Scientists have actually said that there is less energy in today's food than there was a century ago. People who try to boost their production by chemical means don't understand that life depends on the life force and not on that which is lifeless. The astral entities in past ages were objects of worship. An attitude of awe is unnecessary. It is quite enough to give them appreciation, even love, as one ought indeed to love all God's creatures as His outward manifestations. To worship them, however, as began to happen during the declining ages, when human understanding weakened, is to enter, bit by bit, into the merchant consciousness that says, I'll give you what you want, provided you give me something in return. Thus, the nature spirits, not themselves without ego, enjoy the special worshipful attention they get from people who look to them for particular favors. Krishna, during the time when he taught the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, needed to address also this defect in popular consciousness. Buddha, who lived possibly some 2 centuries later, warned people even more strongly against dependence on Vedic rituals as alternatives to self-purification. Krishna is saying in this stanza essentially not to propitiate the lesser gods of natural forces, whose attitude is still quid pro quo, in the sense of wanting some sort of ego payment for favors rendered. The Lord is no merchant. Those who sincerely want Him ask for nothing in return, but pray selflessly only for His love. What Krishna is saying then is, seek the direct experience of God. Don't be satisfied with anything less. As Jesus Christ said also, seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these other things shall be added unto you. It is the true seeker whom Sri Krishna addresses in this passage, as indeed in most of this great scripture. Those who seek lesser favors from God are asking for a teaspoon of soil when they might have the whole kingdom. The problem in people's minds is, of course, that they think to possess. What Krishna is asking of them is that they become. The ego alone can own things, at least in imagination. The soul becomes one with God, and in that oneness possesses the whole universe. A great woman saint in India was once asked to visit another country. "Why should I travel there?" she replied. "I am there already." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Hello, everyone. So nice to see you today. Boy, we have had a blissful week. We had Master's Mahasamadhi, Sri Yukteswar's Mahasamadhi. Last night we had a Kriya initiation. Today we have a discipleship initiation. We're just flowing with bliss these days. This commentary really defines the spiritual path and also the direction that we want to take our consciousness as yogis. And as yogis and as meditation practitioners, we begin to discover more and more the inner reality of life and become less and less attached to the outer reality. And when we are attached to rituals, Master mentions Vedic rituals, but there's Christian rituals, there's Muslim rituals, there's lots of rituals that are God-reminding activities. And nothing's wrong with a God-reminding activity, but Yoganandaji talks about how God-reminding is here and God-experiencing is here. And when you're experiencing and in God's presence, you don't need to be reminded. And so we find sometimes that these rituals that we were raised with fall away, not because of judgment, oh, I don't need that anymore, or anything like that. It just naturally falls away. The more we practice Kriya and read Master's writings and Swamiji's writings, we find deep truths, and we find that we begin to discover those deep truths, that all the experiences Master is talking about, we too can have. It was beautiful to be around Swami Kriyanandaji, and we have many saints actually on this path now that you can experience, people who have these higher states of consciousness. But Swamiji, it was wonderful to be with him because he had completely let go of the whole outer ritual thing. He was in God's presence, in his consciousness. We, for a long time, would bring our issues to him. Swamiji, this happened in that business, this happened in that business. What should we do? These two people aren't getting along. What do we do? And he was very kind and would, if you wrote him letters, he wrote back, or if you had a meeting with him, he would address things, and he always had a higher solution to an issue that was like, oh, why didn't I think of that myself? Sometimes people would hear the solution and say, that's bad advice. Why would I ever do that? And then they would go ahead and do what they wanted to do and realize that had they done what he suggested, things would have worked out for the best. So you learn either the positive way or through the negative way. The positive way, you try what he suggests, it works. The negative way, you don't try what he does, it doesn't what he suggests, and your way doesn't work. So both ways are valid ways to learn. So he was so often in a higher state of consciousness publicly, and I don't mean, certainly when he was giving public lectures, he was in a very high state of consciousness. You were in the room with him and the whole vibration of the room was lifted. He had learned or known, was that the cake? The cake. We have a cake. Did you have the money out for the cake? No. Okay. So anyway, we have cake for birthdays this month and discipleship. So back to the important thing I was talking about. So his consciousness, he had learned how to expand his consciousness out. It's one thing to enjoy bliss just inside. It takes a lot of energy to be able to transfer that bliss, to try and expand that bliss out beyond one's center, to try and include others in that. And he could do that so well. He did that from the day I met him. I'm sure he did it from the day everyone met him who's a part of Ananda. I just remember I was going to a concert. This was 25, maybe it was 26 years ago now. I don't remember. And I wasn't living at Ananda yet. I was just new. I had read Autobiography of a Yogi. And Swamiji's oratorio was going, the Ananda choir was going to sing the oratorio, which is the life of Christ. And it was during either Christmas or Easter, I don't remember which. And I just remember being with my friend, who was kind of at the time my spiritual buddy, and he just came through the door and started walking down the aisle. And he was looking at everybody, and I just felt all my energy just rise all the way up. And it was like, wow, something just happened here. And I was sold at that point. I was sold from Autobiography of a Yogi also, but I was just sold once I got to feel Swamiji. And so he had that ability, but he never said, I can do that, not you. You know, you'll have to work really hard to be able to have what I have. He always said, you can have this too. Always. He included everyone in his, he was so generous and just included everyone in his bliss, in his love, divine love that he gave to people. But towards the end of his life, when people came to him with their little spats, he would say, I don't want to put my mind there. And I think we can all understand that to a point. For instance, when you're meditating and you come out of meditation, and you can be, if you had, even if you didn't have a great meditation, you still had some shift in consciousness for the better, unless it's just a really bad day. But most people have some kind of a shift in consciousness for the better. And then you pull out the newspaper, and suddenly all the old worries come back. And I remember when I first experienced that, because people would always say, now after you meditate, when we teach meditation, we say after you meditate, try and be in that consciousness as long as you can before you go back to your daily activities. But really, what Swamiji did was he held that consciousness and he brought that into his daily activities. But if we allow ourselves to lower our consciousness, and that's really the point, we say try to wait until you go to your daily activities because most of us lower our consciousness in order to do them. But Swamiji never lowered his consciousness to do his daily activities. And so then we begin to say, okay, which activities actually do lower my consciousness? As opposed to, oh, it's good to wait and allow yourself to just bathe in whatever consciousness you've been able to cultivate during your meditation. Bathe in it. Appreciate it. Feel it. You know, when Swamiji says, when Master says, there's bliss in the spine, you know, the straighter our spine is, the more there is bliss in the spine. That's why we keep our spine straight, so we can feel the bliss. It's there. All these things that Master talks about are real. And so Swamiji was very much in his spine, and he very much felt that bliss in his spine constantly. And so he would notice what makes the bliss go down, what makes the bliss go back up. And so we can do experiments like that in our own life. What makes my, if it's not bliss, just happiness or joy, what makes my joy level fall? What makes the joy level rise? And so when we come out of meditation, when we've bathed in that light or that joy or that peace, do try and hold on to it, but even more, rather than grasp onto that experience, even more, just try and keep the mind uplifted. And the more we meditate and practice Kriya Yoga, the more it's possible to keep the mind uplifted in that way. Things fall away. When you know, we just had Sri Yukteswarji's Mahasamadhi, and, you know, that reading mentioned the fun things that Sri Yukteswarji would write about, like the astral world and the devas, and he said all those things existed, and so that it's always fun to know those things, because we grow up maybe even knowing about devas and thinking they're just magical, mythical creatures that someone talked about, or the Irish talked about, or something, little leprechauns. But then Sri Yukteswarji is saying in the Holy Science, or in Autobiography of a Yogi, there they are, that they do exist. And then Master explains, the less we paid attention to them, the more they've dispersed from the planet. But Sri Yukteswar also wrote really wonderful things in his Holy Science, and things that are very helpful in how we can progress on the path, progress towards this higher consciousness. And the way he talks about it is it all lies in the heart. And he talks about something called the 8 meannesses of the heart, and says if we release ourselves from these 8 meannesses, then the heart's natural love comes out. It's similar to Patanjali's yamas and niyamas. When you practice certain things, when you don't practice certain negative things, then as you take the negative habits away, then the heart naturally opens, the behaviors naturally change. You don't have to put a lot of effort and willpower into it, just abstain from certain things, and then naturally our natural human nature, which is good. Very often people think human nature is bad, but human nature is actually good and rooted in the divine, then that naturally comes out. And I wanted to just read a little bit from Holy Science, which is so good. People so often say, oh, the Holy Science, it's so impossible to understand, I could never even try to open a page. But really, okay, maybe we don't know all the Sanskrit terms that are in there, and we don't memorize all of the different koshas and things like that. You can skip through some of that part and get to some really good, meaty, juicy stuff. And so what he did in this book is he so perfectly described the progression of the heart. And not only that, it's not just a personal individual progression, but he said when a whole solar system feels this way, then that represents the yuga it's in. So if everybody, the majority of the people, are trapped in material consciousness, that's Kali Yuga. So personally, we can have our own personal Kali Yuga also. Which we don't want. Trapped in material consciousness. Trapped with a closed heart. And not only that, he said that Kali Yuga state is a tamasic state. Tamasic means basically an energy that doesn't move. And it's very difficult to get that energy moving even through willpower. That very often you have to wait through the tamasic energy for it to naturally progress on its own before you can get out of it. So most people in this room would not just be tamasic people. You wouldn't even be interested in what we do here. So that's good to know. But we can get into those tamasic, material-minded states. And the reason why we're in that state is because the heart is not yet letting go of its meannesses. And so Sri Yukteswarji writes, the 8 meannesses of the heart. Firmness of moral courage, when attained, removes all the obstacles in the way of salvation. See, every word has such a deep, beautiful meaning, not just Sri Yukteswarji's words, but Master's words too. These obstacles are of 8 sorts: hatred, shame, fear, grief, condemnation, race prejudice, pride of pedigree, and a narrow sense of respectability, which 8 are the meannesses of the human heart. Then he says, awakening the magnanimity of the heart by removing these 8 obstacles comes in, and this makes man fit for the practice of asana, remaining in steady and pleasant posture, pranayama, control over prana, involuntary nerve electricities, and pratyahara, changing the direction of the voluntary nerve currents inward. These practices enable man to satisfy his heart by enjoying the objects of the senses as intended for domestic life. So, remember, he says, you want to awaken the magnanimity of the heart by removing these obstacles. Then we're ready for true and deep meditation. So you see how the blockages in the heart keep us from being able to meditate very deeply. And so get a copy of this book yourself. It's available on Kindle. That's what I'm reading from right now. But let me just say these again. Hatred, shame. So hatred, we know what that is. Shame. What is shame? Shame is feeling as though who we are is not enough, and that others see it and we don't want to be seen. That's shame. Fear. I think we all know fear very well. Wow, I can't feel fear and go deep in my meditation? Well, grief. That's when we feel sad about loss, losing something, without it getting resolved. Nothing's wrong with you just feel grief. Someone left their body. Of course we feel grief around it, but when you hold on to that grief, then we get more into a depressive state. But just feeling grief, he said, is one of the blockages in the heart. It can be grief about how we were treated as children, or how we were treated in the workplace, or how friends treat us. Condemnation, judgment would be another word for that. Look at that other person. Luckily, I'm not like them. So remember, this blocks the heart. Race prejudice, in the U.S., we thought some of that issue was getting better, and then we got that president, and suddenly, like, people from the deepest, darkest recesses that most others ignore have come out and said, yay, now I get to hate other races, woo! It's just, you just don't even want to go there. Pride of pedigree, that's birth. Was I born into this caste? Was I born into that caste? Was I born with this name? Was I born with that name? Oh, I'm above you because I was born with this name. I'm above you because of that. And we've all read by now in Raja Yoga that the caste system was not really intended to be societal, just inward, in terms of describing our own progression through things. But, of course, we have that. And now you're either prideful because you are Brahmin, or you're prideful because you're not Brahmin, because it's not in fashion. At some point, Brahmins really became out of fashion. It was good, because there was a lot of stuff going on that needed to shift things over. But let's get out of all of that. How about that? So I wanted to then read another part. So he says, the next step from the tamasic heart that is blocked by these 8 meannesses Then we remove these blockages, and then he talks about how we can begin practicing the Om technique. And when we practice the Om technique, then the pratyahara really begins to happen. And when we practice pranayama, which in our case we're talking about kriya. So once we begin to remove these and we start practicing those techniques on our path, then those techniques really start working for us. But if we haven't gotten out of that stage where the heart is blocked through these 8 meannesses, we're not going to get anywhere on those. So then, suppose we do start letting go of these meannesses, we progress into something called the propelled heart. When man becomes a little enlightened, he compares his experiences relating to the material creation gathered in his wakeful state with his experiences in dream, and understanding the latter to be merely ideas, and begins to entertain doubts as to the substantial existence of the former, meaning he stops truly believing the material world. His heart then becomes propelled to learn the real nature of the universe, and, struggling to clear his doubts, seeks for evidence to determine what is truth. So the kshatriya, the military class, in this state, man is called kshatriya. So when we get a propelled heart, we're in the kshatriya phase of things. Let's see. In this state, men, becoming anxious for real knowledge, need help of one another. Hence, mutual love, the principal necessity for gaining salvation, appears in the heart. So we become socialized, and suddenly we realize, hey, if I love you and you love me, we can help each other. Kind of like a business agreement, I would say. Motivated by the energetic tendency of this love, man affectionately keeps company with those who destroy troubles, clear doubts, and afford peace to him, and hence avoids whatever produces the contrary result. He also studies scientifically the scriptures of divine personages. When man finds Satguru, the Savior, in this way, man becomes able to appreciate what true faith is and understands the real position of the divine personages. When he is fortunate in securing the godlike company of some of them who will kindly stand to him as his spiritual preceptor. Isn't that interesting? When man is looking for the company of someone who will kindly stand in to him as his spiritual preceptor. Isn't that sweet? That's our guru. He has kindly stepped in and said, okay, I'll help you. In the social circle of avatars, one of them says, I'll help that one. And they say, okay, that's yours. I'll help one of the little ones running around, scrambling around with the propelled heart. We have the propelled heart. Following affectionately the holy precepts, he learns to concentrate his mind, directing his organs of sense to their common center, or sensorium, the door of the internal sphere. There he perceives the luminous body of John the Baptist, or Radha, and hears the holy sound of Om, like a stream or river, and being absorbed or baptized in it, begins to move back toward his divinity, the eternal Father, through the different lokas or spheres of the creation. So, isn't that beautiful? How all these steps, of course we know it, but these steps are so beautifully described. Once we begin hearing the inner sounds and practicing our pranayama, we begin to really internalize. We really begin to withdraw the energy from the senses and go deeper and deeper into the spine. But if the heart is not cleared of the meannesses, we will have blocks. And let me see if there was one thing. Then there's the steady heart that comes after that. This state of man is Dwapara, and when this becomes the general state of human beings naturally in any solar system, the whole of that system is said to be in Dwapara Yuga. If man continues to be in the baptized state or feeling the Om vibration, remaining immersed in the holy stream, he gradually comes to a pleasant state where his heart wholly abandons the ideas of the external world and becomes devoted to the internal one. Then there's the devoted heart. In this devoted state, man, withdrawing his self, comes to the world of magnetic attributes, the electricities and poles. He then becomes able to comprehend chitta, heart, the magnetic third portion of creation. Then there's the clean heart. Man, continuing Godward, further lifts himself. Then all the departments of ignorance being withdrawn, his heart comes to a clean state, void of all external ideas. Then man becomes able to comprehend the spiritual light, Brahma, the real substance in the universe, which is the last and everlasting spiritual portion in creation. In this stage, man is called Brahmana, or of the spiritual class. This stage of the human being is called Satya, and when this becomes the general state of man, naturally, in any solar system, the whole of that system is said to be in Satya Yuga. Wow. So, you can see, isn't that interesting how he focuses on the heart? He's not saying, once you attain this technique, or you attain that, or you can do all these mantras, or you can do this, then you'll have samadhi as defined in some way in the scriptures. Instead, he's saying it's a whole process of clearing out the heart. And chitta, that's a word we've used before. When you're, it was either treta or sat. Was chitta the second before last thing? Yeah. That would have been the Treta Yuga thing, when we recognize chitta. So I'm not saying all this stuff to say, let's memorize all these terms, but you can see the trend there in terms of purifying the heart, allowing the heart to remove the meannesses. And he writes up very clearly what they are. So if we're practicing those, then we know, oh, that's why I'm blocked. And when we're not feeling bliss in the spine, we can say, maybe I better review some of those meannesses of the hearts. He's not saying just meditate and everything will just naturally fall away. He's saying meditate and practice right attitude. We kind of repeat that over and over again here. But what's wonderful is it is the heart. And when the heart is open, so much can happen. And then he states how in the Dwapara Yuga state of mind, we're still, though, in this give and take energy. And how we keep company with each other because we get mutual benefit from things. And I wanted to take a moment here to mention divine friendship. Divine friendship is different than what we might be used to in terms of how we normally interact with others. You know, there's the interaction with our family members. That's you're mine, period. You're mine. And you give me what I tell you to give me. And depending actually on what your pecking order is, depends on who gives to who. And so gimme what I want, and then I'll give you what you want. It's a very conditional love. Then one thing that can happen that we want to make sure to stay out of is at Ananda we don't fall into that. Because people need space. If you ever get the opportunity to read Swamiji's Expansive Marriage, it's not just for people in marriage at all. It very nicely explains divine friendship and what's necessary for that. And as yogis, we don't want to be trapped into one stuck place in relation to other people. You know, if everyone came in here and it became a family, then as soon as you walked in, you'd have your place. And you better stay in that place to keep the balance of the family how it should be. But that's not the way it is here. People come in and they are free to be who they are and free to grow as needed. And if people have grabbed us and said, you're this way and you're for me, then how can we grow into a more natural state of who we're supposed to be? So just watch how friendship is practiced in your life. You know, I remember when I first came to the path, I had no idea about divine friendship. And I had best friends, and I had my family, and of course my family, we were all, you're mine. And but with the best friends, I also practiced you're mine. Not just you're mine, but, you know, we would meet and, of course, find all these things in common. And then we would also share ideas, you know, talking back and forth. And then it became, what about that person? And what about this person? And what about that person? And that person too. And we agree, but no one, you know, others don't agree with us. So we have something in common, and that's our bond now. And so we're the same, and everyone else is different. And I remember wanting those kinds of friendships. I wanted to have my best friends. I wanted to have that. That's how I felt fulfilled. And then I remember either I would grow or someone else would grow, and it'd be like, hey, where are you going? Why don't you want to talk to me in the same way anymore? What's going on? You know, hey, who do you think you are? Better than me? You know, all those thoughts come into the minds. And then we try and grasp onto what we thought we had with that person, and they've grown, or they've fallen, one or the other, but the compatibility is no longer there. And if we just hold on to them and force them to be the way they were, you know, our heart gets tighter and tighter. The reason we do this is because we want the love they used to give us. Because we think, if they don't give us that love anymore, where am I going to get the love? And so we hold on to that. And then I also remember the friendships where I grew, and people would do the same thing to me. And I just didn't feel like getting in the mud anymore. I just didn't feel like gossiping anymore. I didn't feel like agreeing on everything and finding an intimacy in it. You know, I agree and you agree, and so now we have this connection, right? I just lost my taste for it. And so then I had some friends that were like, hey, what's going on with her, you know? And so as we grow, we find that our intimate connections come from the divine, to the divine. That's where the intimacy comes from. So rather than getting it one-on-one like this, it's coming from here. And just like practicing divine love with others, we have to learn to practice the divine love with the divine. Unconditional love. We move from a stage of relating to the divine as, I prayed in this way, give me what I prayed for, or I did this ritual, now give me the results. That's a common one. I went to the temple or to church or wherever, and I did this mantra, and I had the priest do this, and so give me my results. And certainly as yogis, we can have strong minds and manifest, and we can affirm to have things a certain way, and we can repeat it over and over again, just like when you tell a family member you want something from them and you just repeat it over and over and over again until you finally get it. And we do that to God. And then maybe they'll drop a couple cookies on us. God will say, okay, here's a couple cookies. But then when we learn to love unconditionally, that's when we may not understand fully how to do it with God, but we can practice with each other. That's when you give love, you allow love to flow through. But it's not that same one-on-one thing. But the love flows through. It's compassionate, it's caring, it comes from an open heart, it's non-judgmental. There's still personal connections and things like that, but you allow that person to have their space and to be who they are fully. And you care about their highest good. That's what I would say defines a spiritual friendship the most importantly, is you care about their highest good. Some of the friends that I had that I ended up letting go of, I knew they didn't care about my highest good. They cared only about what they were getting, from not just me, but others. I remember when I was moving to India the second time, to Chennai. And one of my friends, who's an old friend that isn't a part of Ananda anymore, but we have maintained some kind of a connection. And so she said, "Oh, I'm afraid I'll never see you." And I thought, what a strange thing to say. Why not, "Oh, I'm so happy for you. You're taking your next step. I'm so happy for you that you get to do that. Now, I am a little concerned I won't get to see you. How can we make sure we stay in contact?" None of that. Just like, what about me? You're leaving me. Wait, you're leaving me. It's like, no, please. So I got a very strong feeling she doesn't care at all about my higher good. And I still care about her and her higher good. But it just kind of showed me exactly where things were. And so you can tell by people's comments, are they coming from, "Hey, come back to me and communicate with me the way I want you to"? Or are they saying, "Wow, you've really grown," or "Wow, I'm so happy for you that you are meditating regularly like you said," or I'm so happy for you that, wow, I can really tell your heart has opened over time," or I can really tell that, it's not about me, it's about caring for that other person's higher good. It's not, "Give me what I want from you. Hey, you're not being the way you used to be." Instead, it's like, "I'm really happy for you the way you are." And then we still, even if we behave that way, we may still lose friends momentarily. But if we have true detachment, if it was a true friendship, it'll come back. It'll grow into something new. If it wasn't a new friendship, then it wasn't right for us to start with. And so even in divine friendship practiced here, it goes through different steps. You just get to a point where even though you're loving people, even though you're relating to others, there's still always the divine talking to you inside. And that's how Swamiji was with us. He cared about each one of us. You could feel that caring. And yet, he cared the most with God, but it wasn't a competition. We all benefited from him carrying with God. We all benefited with that. So let's take our propelled hearts and try and move them towards the higher heart level, and read this part in the Holy Science. It's very helpful, especially if we're feeling stuck, like, why aren't I moving forward? Read that part and then start a little plan or a prayer campaign for yourself. Divine Mother, I want to let go of my condemning part. I want to let go of this part, or help me release that grief that's stuck in my heart for years, from loss. We can really hold on to grief for a long time. So if there's that stuckness, go for the prayer campaign, go for the transformation campaign to release these things. And it's not like we have to, with willpower, do something. We just have to release it. And then suddenly, natural harmony comes out of the heart. Natural love, natural way of being just comes from the good human nature that we have. So let's all try this together and just have our little propelled hearts move forward. And that's what we're all here for together also. That's what spiritual community is about, to help our little propelled hearts move to the next stage and then celebrate with each other. Hooray! You've grown. Hooray! I've grown. Hooray! Being here is to support each other in like-mindedness. Like-mindedness, caring about similar things as a group, caring about spiritual progress, caring about people growing out of old habits, growing out of possessiveness, growing out of anger and bullying even. People will bully each other, growing out of that kind of behavior, and instead moving into softness, moving into kindness. Swamiji said kindness is one of the most important qualities we can cultivate. So let's cultivate that kindness, create an environment of kindness, not just how we show up here in the face we show everybody here, but also at home. That we don't just appear a certain way at the Sangha. Hi, I'm very charming and harmonious. And then at home we're like, ah! So let's try and integrate those two things. That's integration, where we're the same no matter where we are. We're the same at work, we're the same here, we're the same there. And that's a good integration to have for the propelled heart. That's a good project for the propelled heart. All of us are propelled hearts. It's a good project for the propelled heart to work on. Okay, God bless you.